Welcome to another episode of the Peak Performance Selling Podcast, where we interview top sellers and sales leaders to learn the different tips, tricks, and mental strategies that they use to create sustainable peak performance. Let's get rolling. Welcome to today's episode of the Peak Performance Selling Podcast. Today, as always, but even more so, I'm incredibly excited to welcome on Sam Shoolman, who is currently sitting in the Director of Corporate Sales role at HubSpot, but over his almost 10-year journey at HubSpot has held a lot of different roles in a lot of different locations, working across the globe, helping us open offices, lead sales teams. And not only has he stood out as an absolute rock star performer, leader, but also brings a level of approach to his sales leadership style that I don't think you see classically in sales leaders. Sam is somebody that I've gotten a chance to know who has been an absolute champion for diversity and inclusion in sales, women in sales, and really making it a welcoming place for anybody of any walk of life to not only stand out, but also excel. And doesn't have the aggressive tactics that you think about in a traditional seller, but has a little bit different approach that I'm really curious to pull out of him today to hear about how he thinks about selling, how he thinks about leadership, how he thinks about growing and developing leaders and teams, and ultimately how he can stay balanced and even keeled through that entire process through being an absolute rock star for many, many years and through different stages and phases of organizations. So Sam, welcome onto the show.
Jordan, wow. Thank you. Amazing intro. Appreciate that.
Luckily, you make it easy on me. So I've always got to start to understand a little bit more about how'd you get into the sales journey? Did you think you were going to start out in sales? And talk to us a little bit about, what's got you to where you're at today?
Yeah, for sure. So I did not really know about sales growing up. Didn't come from a family where my parents were in sales or anything like that. I always thought I'd be a lawyer. My dad is an attorney. He kind of talked me out of it in college when I was graduating and said, you don't really want to practice law. Don't get a law degree to open doors to something else down the road, figure out what that something else is. And if you have to do grad school to get there, go for it. So I had really loved study abroad in Madrid. When I was a junior, I interned at a marketing agency that's actually incidentally now a HubSpot partner. And I knew I wanted to live and work abroad again. So graduating college, I was looking for a foundation in business. To me, that meant marketing or sales. I wasn't going to do finance. I didn't really know what sales was about, but I found Meltwater, which is a media monitoring software company. And they have a lot of international offices and a training program where they send you abroad if you do well in your home office. So I joined them in Boston, learned what a quota was, learned what a cold call was, sourced my own business, cut my teeth, got a transfer to Israel after a little while and opened Tel Aviv office with them back in 2012. And that's before I came over to HubSpot, 2011. So we're going back, but that was my start in sales.
Awesome. And what have you learned? What did you start to learn about, working internationally early on? And then I know you've done a few different stints internationally, opening offices within the HubSpot organization. What have you learned around differences across international sales, different cultures, different geographies versus some of the experiences you've come back to the United States?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting, right? There's a lot, people are people. People want to buy from people. Relationship matters everywhere, matters more in some cultures than others. And I think that preparation and research go a long way in every culture. So there's a lot of overlap. And I think that by exposing oneself to more cultures and diversity of thought makes you stronger, makes you more able to adjust in the moment when you get a curveball in one of your deals. And I'd say when I worked at Mia, certainly some cultures really appreciate a lot more context and documentation and preparation. And Others are looking to get, to the point really quickly. Others have the niceties, and you just need to build more rapport. Face-to-face matters more in some cultures. So as much as we can cater to what the buyer wants, that's ideal. And I think I've got a better understanding of that, still growing, still learning. And then certainly for hiring and working with coworkers from different backgrounds and, ethnicities and across the board, that's been absolutely amazing, and a lot of lessons learned along the way.
That is really cool. I love the thought that people are people and want to buy from people. As much as I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about the challenger sale and saying that, yeah, the relationship-based seller is not the top performer in their study. I really think about the challenger as somebody who's a good friend, who is a good resource, who has a strong relationship, and one that's strong enough that they can challenge you and you'll actually take it, versus feeling like you are getting, told you need to do something differently, so you buy my product forcefully, versus actually having that relationship of helping them solve for the things that they care about.
Yeah. And the challenger has to have value, right? Like, no matter the culture, you have to be able to add value from very early on in a conversation, have insights that you're presenting and an opinion of what they're doing wrong or what they could be doing better. And that is global.
Absolutely. I think that's so powerful, coming back to value. And I'm really curious, as you've evolved through some individual contributor roles to, managing your own teams, to then leading managers of teams, you talk about learning and evolving and continuing to still learn. Talk to me about some of the learnings that you had to go through for yourself as you moved through those different roles, from, people manager to people manager of people managing people, to see about, what have you had to change? What skills have you had to flex or learn along the way?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot. Where to begin? I think you've heard this before, and I'll say it: flexible leadership, situational leadership is really important. Understanding where your people are and meeting them there, and looking after a relationship and next steps differently than trying to standardize it across the team. Some standardization and structure is important, but I'd say that's been a learning curve for me. And certainly when you move from managing reps into leading leaders, these are oftentimes the top reps that were promoted, and for good reason. So there's even more sort of preparation that's needed and more that they expect of you, and they should. So I had to really level up there, I'd say, moving from manager into director, and being, detaching from having the answer as well, or having the right call, being a little bit more collaborative and interdependent versus independent. That's a big thing from IC into leadership. I love 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I think that I was kind of independent and autonomous for a long time as a rep. And when you move into leadership, you need to work cross-functionally with others. Your managers, they're your peers in a big way, and you learn from them. And I think, that's humbling and it makes you vulnerable, but it's really important. So those are a couple things that come to mind first and foremost.
I think those are great, as you really think about not only the resources that you've leaned on, but continuing to learn from the other folks that are your peers, and really needing to be flexible. I love that you mentioned vulnerability, and I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts about how do you balance your level of vulnerability as a leader, where you're not taking your team down, but you're also showing them that you are a human.
Yeah. I think getting loud about my shortcomings and my mistakes, not just like in an all hands meeting when everyone's there, but in one-on-ones and in team settings. And here's a deal where I didn't have a JEP, or we lost this deal and here's why. I recently, you mentioned diversity, inclusion, and belonging earlier. I recently shot my team a note about Juneteenth being tomorrow and the importance of it, and also that I still have a lot more to learn. And I mean it. And I think, leading from the front that way, it creates psychological safety for people, that they know, like, we're on the same page here. And no one needs to feel self-conscious that, oh, you've got so much to learn, or they seem to have it all figured out. Like, I don't have it all figured out. I'm about to be a new parent in a couple months. I've been asking people for tips and advice, and we do these Peloton rides as a group sometimes, and we're celebrating whoever won, and you can see on the leaderboard, like, a lot of people are working on it and working on themselves, and sharing that, especially in a remote culture, is, I think, really important.
I think those are all really good things to, again, connect beyond just the, how's your team doing review? How is the, pipeline or, hiring, recruiting pipeline, that are all part of the job that have to happen, but can actually move into the, oh yeah, I'm a human, I'm working out, and oh yeah, you beat me here. And, here's where I'm struggling to, still learn about these things, because, I think as we talk about diversity inclusion, it's something that a lot of us are learning. As I talk to a lot of people as a, straight white dude in sales, that's the most of us historically. And it's been really limiting. But as I've got a chance to interview some really fantastic people like Chantel George and others that have really opened my eyes and my mind, and as we've been incredibly impressive about what I think we've been creating in HubSpot as a culture of inclusiveness and belonging for folks that historically couldn't see themselves in sales, is really, really powerful. So I love hearing you get loud about my shortcomings. I think that is really fantastic. As we talk a little bit about D&I, talk to me a little bit about some of the areas that maybe you've seen other organizations, other leaders you talk to maybe get wrong or struggle with, as there's an opportunity to really be champions for our sales organizations to model what our customers look like, what our new potential hires could and should look like, beyond just the traditional old white dude in sales.
Right. Yeah, it's a loaded one. I think it's really difficult to build genuine empathy and allyship with any group that you don't have legitimate connection to, and truly know individuals who identify, whether it's LGBTQ or BIPOC. So for organizations or leaders that really struggle with it, I would probably ask, how many people in your network are you spending time with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And what's the environment where you're having these interactions? Because it has to start there. You can read articles, you can listen to podcasts, you can go to exec meetings about DI&B, but until you have a community that is diversifying and you hear directly from people, not to tokenize, but we have people of color at HubSpot, allies are welcome. We have LGBTQ Alliance, allies are welcome. I've joined those groups. I go to those meetings. I also have expanded my network outside of HubSpot in deliberate, meaningful ways. And I'm lucky to live in a city that has, a pretty diverse population. And that's important to me. And I want to be more well-rounded in my ideologies and my empathy as an adult than I think I was as a kid, which was relatively sheltered and raised in, a white Jewish suburban area. And I want for my daughter, who's to come in 2 months, to have that mentality and that kind of exposure as well. Because otherwise, you're really siloed, and it's harder and harder to build that true empathy and allyship that's not just performative, frankly.
Wow. I think that is so true, and is so easy to just do that pulse check on yourself of, who am I spending my time with most given day? What does my network look like? As I had to do that for myself, in all honesty, as I started thinking about building the podcast, I was reaching out to my direct network and realized that it's mostly male, it's mostly white male that had seen a path for themselves to sales potentially, or saw opportunity anywhere they wanted to go early in their lives, and have really started to learn and, oh my gosh, learn so much more, honestly, as I've started to connect with other folks like Chantel, like Nikki Ivy, a couple other podcasts that are that'll probably drop before this one comes out, but that are just doing amazing things to just help me learn more about the world from this, somewhat sheltered view. And it's really cool as you've had this chance to work internationally and spend time abroad. I know my time in Spain as well was an incredible opportunity for me to just learn about the world and see that other people live in much different ways than we might in the United States. And they can be totally joyful and happy in their own unique way, whether it's poverty in Morocco, whether it's, eating a different dinner schedule, maybe in Spain or whatever it might be. There are different ways that we can live, and building that diversity of thought is so, so powerful.
Yeah.
To pivot a little bit, you talked a little bit about doing like a Peloton ride. We may need to get your Peloton handle here for any listeners that want to try and chase you. Good luck. Just to let you guys know, Sam destroys me anytime I get on a ride trying to chase him. He is a very, very athletic guy. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things you do outside of work to maintain your health, your mental health and fitness, and how you support yourself there.
I'm really glad you asked. I don't think you can have a great mindset or mental health at work if you don't have physical health, or if it's not at least a work in progress for you. It's not about, who's skinnier, who's stronger, but I think working on strength and working on physical fitness is hugely important. And I'm obviously biased and I'm speaking from experience here, but it's grounding for me to be engaged with my body every day. I start my day with yoga at least 10 to 15 minutes in the morning. I try to work out at least 5 to 6 times a week, and that's a combo of runs, kayaking, biking, weights, yoga classes, stationary and biking outside. And I love it. And I connect with nature. We're meant to be outside. We're animals. Like, we're not just meant to be at our desk and computer. So I can only handle so many sort of Zoom workout classes and Peloton, but that part is fun sometimes. And it's community building. Like, you and I follow each other on Strava. I love seeing what others are up to and sort of tracking my progress. And it's really motivating for me. And it's super grounding. And I notice if I go a couple days without a workout, and if I'm eating poorly for a couple days, like, it is shocking now how quickly I spiral, psychologically and mentally. So it's a real foundational element for me. The routine I like. My body knows what to expect. And what I've started incorporating recently is like mini workouts throughout the day, because sometimes it is hard in the morning to get an hour or an hour and a half or something like that. And in the afternoon, I'm sometimes so burnt out. But if I have a half hour between meetings, or if I have a lunch break, I can do 10 minutes of, push-ups and jumping jacks and sit-ups. And that's great to get your heart rate variability going. And just to mix it up, and walks around the block and all that. Really important. I track it maniacally. I don't think that's ever going to change. I am lucky to have a wife who cares about that too. And your community really matters. So similar to the BIPOC comment, like, if you don't have people who value their physical fitness and are pushing themselves and trying to get into that routine in your life, you don't have allies and motivators in your immediate network, like, you got to get some. It's just going to be so much harder to get there without that community.
Those are all awesome points. I was actually having a conversation with a friend who started a post on Instagram the other day. He super active outdoors guy, lives up here in the mountains, skis all the time, hikes, very active athlete, broke his hip and was laid up for a little while. Then was starting to get better and had a massive cut across his hand that also made it hard for him to be active. And he gained a bunch of weight. And his Instagram post started like, hey, here's a story about depression. And where he had lost his ability to be active. And to your point about, physical health is what helps support great mental health and ideally great performance at work. He talked a lot about how he lost that. And over the last 120 days, he really recommitted to working out and eating right and fueling his body with the right things. That, the transformation pictures he posted were insane to me over a matter of 4 months. And not to mention how he talked about his mental health. But one of the things that he brought up for me that I hadn't thought of as much is he was like, just do 5 to 10 minutes of like a core workout. If you have a break between calls, if you have a little bit of space, it doesn't have to be the, hour in the gym with like intense sore muscles afterwards.
Right.
It can be just a little break between the day. In the past, I used to do, maybe 50 push-ups or something, or 50 sit-ups, like in between a call if I'm feeling a little light and lethargic. But to say, yeah, maybe I'll take that for 5 or 10 minutes was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. And now to hear it a second time in a row, I think is something that just creates that space to say, yeah, we don't have to shoot for the stars in every single goal that we set, because these little micro breaks, these micro movements can really help build on top of each other and create those habits that enable you to be more consistent.
Absolutely.
I'm a little curious. You mentioned tracking, Strava for sure. What are some of the key things that you track as you think about your physical fitness or mental fitness and health as well?
Yeah. I mean, you get month over month stats and yearly review. I more just, it keeps me accountable. I have friends there who I follow, like yourself. Am I consistently putting up workouts? And, do I feel consistently engaged in my body and like I'm building in some way? And that might be, weight loss. It might be muscle mass, and, whatever your goals are as an athlete. I have a friend who's training, jujitsu right now and trying to work on his split and, his flexibility, and everyone has different goals, but I like having it compiled in Strava. Like I'm not a huge social media guy, occasional Instagram and stuff like that, but I really enjoy the community aspect of it more than anything.
I think that's super powerful. You mentioned early on your dad talking to you about, well, figure out what that something else is and go from there. And you just mentioned goals. And so I'm curious to tie those pieces together, because I think many people set goals just based upon what the company tells them they need to do or what they think society wants for them. And so how do you think about setting goals for yourself, or maybe also working with the leaders that you support on getting to or setting goals that are really meaningful and important to them as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say at HubSpot, we are a very goal-oriented company, and that's helped us to grow a lot year over year. So I wouldn't say there's a whole ton of goal setting that I'm doing in my job that sits outside of what sales operations covers. And some of that's collaborative, and certainly, they need our opinion and to work together on it. But I guess to answer your question, when there are opportunities for goal setting around things that don't already have a quota, on revenue or headcount or things like that, making it achievable is really important to me, because you're trying to build a new habit usually. And there's so much research into habit building that it needs to start small. It needs to be achievable and really simple. And so that's what I try to work on with my team. And I also try to take that into my coaching plans as well. Rather than, we need to double activity, or you need to, increase pipeline coverage by 3x. It's like, okay, meet someone where they're at and make it something they can actually do, because then they'll actually try for it and have a foundation that they can build on to do more down the road. I think some people shy away or are scared from setting goals that don't seem aggressive enough. But like, if you're coming from nothing right now, then anything is something. I hope that made sense.
Totally. And do you do anything for yourself around personal goals? And, as maybe you think about mapping your career or where you want to take yourself, do you do anything outside of that?
Yeah, I have personal goals, and, I moved into the corporate director role a few months back. I had been sitting in small biz for just over 3 years prior to that as a director, and in Sydney prior. So I'm usually looking for growth opportunities and challenges that need to be solved. And I have a lot to learn in corp. It's early days here. There's still a lot that we're working through, but it's very motivating for me to be part of something that I feel has a need for the business. And for me personally, I don't know what I'm doing fully, and I'm learning a lot. So that's going to continue being a guiding force for me in my career. It's less about sort of title. Obviously there's compensation you want to map to what you're doing. And I think that becomes, standard after a time in sales and having success. But I'm really happy, and my goal is continued learning and growth, and taking on new challenges and having impact. And it sounds kind of cliche, but I just don't know why I would go for something else right now.
No, I think those are the things that drive fulfillment. The learning, the challenge, the ability to, as we talked a little bit before about, having a new baby coming into the world, using different parts of your brain and different skills is where we grow as humans, and we get to those innate qualities that actually help us feel like we are making progress, we are thriving, and we are not just stagnant. So I love hearing how you think about, just getting into a challenge and putting yourself into a position of, I don't know all the answers, and I've got to learn from my peers. I've got to learn from, maybe people that have even been doing the job as an individual contributor, to continue to move forward. I think is really, really cool. How do you coach your managers to bounce back, or to coach their teams if they've had a tough month or tough quarter? What type of feedback do you give to folks in those situations that maybe you're used to excelling time in, month in, quarter out? How do you help folks bounce back? What do you coach them to do, or how do you work with your teams to do that?
Yeah, I think usually people going through a really tough slump are very zeroed in on that. And my job initially is just to help them zoom out into like the big picture. So if, as you're saying, like they're usually a top performer, it's like, all right, let's chart your career. Let's chart your trajectory so far, right? A lot of 100%, 150%. Okay, here's a dip. That's what we're on. Like, do you think the rest of your career, do you think 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, it's just going to continue going down? Like, no, this is just a blip. This is a valley, right? And let's take a look, learn from the losses, right? Loss analysis is so important. We do a lot of celebrating wins, but I don't know that every team or individual does enough digging into like, why exactly did I lose that? Or why did I miss quota? And really specifics, like what's the learning? There's a learning from every failure and every lost deal. And if we're accounting for that and we're able to say, okay, so here are the 5 things that I'm focused on doing differently this quarter, this week, how can I support you with that? How are we tracking it? Make it a SMART goal, make it, specific, measurable, actionable, time bound. Like that's all really important and achievable. Like I said before, right? Not too lofty short term, but just being empathetic and sharing my failures too. I think people always need to hear, like, I have been there. But, not belittling what they're going through, because sometimes that can be done in a way that's like, well, it could be worse. It could be blah, blah, blah. And, I think you just have to hear people out, let them vent, be there for them, help them zoom out, take perspective, create an action plan, make it a good one, go forward and prosper, have some fun with it, crack jokes, bring humor. Like someone asked me recently, what's different about my leadership style, or not different, or what's important to me in leadership more so, because there's a lot of funny leaders, but like people need to look forward to interactions with you. I think it's the same thing for customers and prospects. Like your team does not want to report to someone who's just brass tacks, down to business, in and out. Like, sure, efficiency is great, and I don't want to just beat around the bush forever, but I want to make our interactions like light and amiable and make people laugh, because that's a good feeling. And there's a endorphin release, right?
That's perfect. I think that is so great, and was the next question I was going to ask you. So you just nailed it anyway. As you think about how you show up for folks and want to be that human that is not just a robot about the numbers, and actually wants to, give credit to people's situation, understand, meet them where they're at, and also say, okay, how can we enjoy these interactions? Because sometimes, like it or not, like we're probably stuck together for a while, even, regardless of wherever you may land on that spectrum. Talk to me a little bit as we get a couple rapid fire questions to wrap up here. Do you love winning or dislike losing more?
I feel like I should have a really quick answer for this. I don't know. I really like winning and I really dislike losing. I don't know if I have an internal odometer or thermometer that tells me which is more powerful for me.
I agree with you. This is why I love asking people these questions, because just hearing how people think through it. Some people are adamant, love winning, or absolutely despise losing. And I fall to the very same place that you do, where it's like, oh, I love the feeling of winning, and man, losing also really sucks. I've tried to, again, continually move to like, well, it's, win or learn versus win or lose, but like the loss still stings. But I think that sting from the loss helps drive motivation, helps drive interaction. So I like that. Part of the reason why I asked that is because that's one of my favorite interview questions to ask folks, or have been asked in the past. And so I'm curious, what's one of your favorite interview questions to ask folks to really get inside of their head to think about how you can decide if they're somebody that may be a great fit for your team?
I really like asking people what they're motivated to learn better than they understand now. It's kind of like asking, like, what are your gaps? What are your weaknesses? Where would you want to partner most with me? What are we building towards, in 5 years? What's this a stepping stone to? I always find that interesting. And I usually wrap up interviews saying, like, what's an important or interesting thing about you, to you, that we haven't covered yet? Because a lot of the time, your line of questioning, it doesn't leave room for someone to share something about themselves that is really important. And I've learned some amazing things that way.
That's a really cool one. And yeah, most interviews I've been a part of or interact with don't have that space. And so to create that, to again, bring that human element so you can have the unique interaction with that person that you talk about in your leadership style, makes a ton of sense why I really look up to and respect the work that you do. Last one I have for you. What does success mean to you? You've touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear how you think about that right now.
Success in a broad term, to like, what does success mean in general, or to me personally?
To you personally.
I mean, success to me at this stage would be, finding ways that I can keep giving back to my community and to my company, in bigger and more meaningful ways. Revenue contribution is important. That's key for sales. We're the production engine. But to your point before, there's a lot of issues right now, like plaguing our world and in society. And I think we've all had a lot of time the past year to steep ourselves in those. And I've become a bit more aware and active, and I'd like to pay it forward. I don't know. I'd like to put my skills to better and better use. I think success would be that I'm raising, a family and contributing to a community where I live and where I work that's leaving it better than it was, and using my skill sets to do that, right? Which I have a platform, and I shouldn't be wasting it with silence on important topics. So success to me is also like understanding when to speak up and when not to. And I think that, that's a learning and a work in progress, but hopefully representing my people to where they're proud to be on my team and don't feel it's just an assignment, but that it's where they want to be, and that I'm helping them to grow, helping myself to grow at the same time. That's the goal.
That's so great on so many levels. Sam, I cannot thank you enough for joining on with us. For folks that really look up to Sam's leadership style. Hearing him talk about it, I've got to give a quick plug. He is definitely hiring a bunch of folks right now. So if any folks have interest with some good corporate sales experience, looking to join on the continuous rocket ship of HubSpot and work for Sam on his teams, there's a lot of opportunity there. Where can folks find you, Sam? Where are good places to track you down?
Yeah, at Sam Shoolman on Twitter, I think. And LinkedIn. I'm all about LinkedIn. That'd be great. Thank you for the plug. We are hiring. We are hitting goals. We'd love to meet you.
Awesome. Sam, thanks so much. And until next time, let's make it a great day.
It's thanks to help from listeners like you, this podcast can continue to grow and help others. If you found anything helpful in today's episode, please take a second, share with a friend, and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast today. Thanks.